Okay, our next speaker is Margaret Hewitt, and I think you'll remember me saying that I think one of the most understood or underappreciated aspects of keeping athletes healthy was the concept of rest. I think in addition to that, the second thing that's really important and poorly understood or applied is sports nutrition. It's not so much the sports part of it, it's really the nutrition, teaching athletes how to eat well, to make sure they're getting enough calories or energy to sustain the amount of output or performance that they want to do. So if an athlete's eating poorly and they're not getting the energy their body needs to participate in whatever sport it is, then again, that can contribute very significantly to the possibility of injury, making the bones weaker, not giving the muscles the energy that they need. So I think Margaret's talk this morning is really very important. I hand it over to her.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for coming. It's good to see such a large group this morning. And we hope that you can take this information today and pass it along to any other coaches or parents that you work with. And I just want to spend a few minutes speaking on nutrition, but I'm very happy to answer more questions in the back specific to individual needs. But the biggest thing we're trying to emphasize here is the amount of fuel, of calories, energy that you're putting in your body, as well as the amount of fluids, are really going to directly affect your performance, especially athletes. We know that kid athletes, teen athletes have such high energy needs. It's common that we're not getting enough or we're getting the wrong types of fuel. So that's what I'd like to focus on, is looking at the quality, quantity, and frequency of the fuel that athletes are getting, as well as the fluids. So to just begin with the fuel aspect of it, we want to think about how athletes need to eat at least every 2 to 3 hours throughout the day. That could easily be 5 or 6 times in a day, just to achieve that average of 2,000 to 5,000 calories a day that most athletes need. It's going to depend on the age of the athlete, and you want to do an individual assessment for calorie needs, but still we want to think about the quality of foods that we're actually getting in that 2,000 to 5,000 calorie range. Another important aspect is trying to keep a normal eating routine every day. Not just Monday through Friday when we have the practices on a nightly basis, but on the weekends as well. Research shows that athletes tend to be more lean and have more energy when they eat on a routine basis. You know, every 2 to 3 hours we're fueling our body with the right nutrients of carbs, proteins, lean fats, so that we can actually get the most energy based on the fuel we're eating. Equally important is the type of fuel that we're going to put in our body before an exercise as well as after. We often hear about recovery nutrition, or how people want to carb load, okay, before exercise, or try to recover with carbs and protein afterwards. There's a right way to do this and a way that is going to negatively impact your performance. So we think about a recovery snack within a half hour if a meal can't be eaten within an hour after that exercise. A recovery snack usually could be something of a protein and a carb. Think of like cottage cheese and fruit, cheese stick and whole wheat crackers, a trail mix of cereal, peanuts, and raisins. It doesn't have to be a fancy protein bar or a certain supplement or shake. It's just whole food that is going to give you those natural nutrients, proteins, vitamins, minerals, to help get your utmost performance. So thinking of recovery, we're trying to give our body those nutrients to replace what we've lost. Now, I mentioned a term that we probably hear a lot, of that carb loading aspect, and I think of some local athletes I've spoken to who mentioned like the team dinners, where they have the pasta meal, just spaghetti everywhere, the sauce, French bread, maybe a salad. But we want to think about how this extravagant meal, especially the night before a cross-country meet the next morning or a swim meet the next day, might actually be hindering performance rather than enhancing. So as I mentioned earlier, it's that routine, meals that you eat every day. every night for supper versus just that one night before the event, to actually give you that performance enhancement as you eat throughout the whole week, not just the night before. So as a coach or as a parent, really emphasizing that healthy nutrition on a daily basis. Now, a couple topics specific that I've received questions on before for males versus females. A lot of time, male athletes are trying to build muscle, and we might encourage or think to encourage adding more protein to our diet, where protein should increase muscle mass. But in reality, it's a matter of increasing your calories every day, not just of proteins, but of healthy carbs and fats every day by about 300 calories or more, plus the right exercise stimulus to achieve more of that muscle growth. So don't think that by adding all the protein powders and adding all the protein shakes are going to build more muscle. It's actually overall calories on a daily basis, as well as the right exercise training to build that muscle. Something specific to females would be called the female athlete triad, and that's a three-part condition that we would look at, where the root cause is where we're not getting adequate energy. Females who often need to mind their weight, like in gymnastics, diving, distance runners, often can feel the need where they have to limit their energy. So they're not getting enough fuel in the day, and although they're pushing their body to these extreme limits, the symptoms are going to be poor bone health, where we see more stress factors, and also loss of menstrual cycle. So if for 3 months a female doesn't have her period, she might think, ooh, you know, this is great, and tell all of her friends. But the problem is, it's not healthy for her body now or in the future, years to come. So something, or two topics, gender specific, but equally important to be mindful of. Moving on to fluids, because we often think of drinking enough water throughout the day, or even the topic of different sports drinks, Powerade, Gatorade, things of the like. We definitely want to emphasize the importance of fluids, because research does show that depending on your amount of hydration directly affects your energy level for that sport. So you can make a big difference on how well you're performing based on your hydration level. So a couple things, other points, that dehydration makes an effect on your athletic performance, usually causes early fatigue, electrolyte imbalance, meaning your loss of sodium or potassium, and even dehydration may alter attention or decision-making ability on the field. And I can think of summertime now with heat, or even in the fall, 1-a-day or 2-a-day practices. The fluids that you're drinking can make a big difference on your performance. So there's some specific guidelines in terms of how much fluid to have before practice, during, and after. But the most important thing is to listen to your thirst throughout the day. Drink fluids with meals. Have a water bottle on hand, and listen to your thirst cues throughout the day. 1 hour before practice, it's a very good idea to have at least 8 to 20 ounces of water. During practice, it would be about 4 to 6 ounces every 15 minutes, and a gulp is usually about 1 ounce. So, if a kid comes back from being out on the field, instruct them to take 4 gulps of water, as a minimum. And then after practice, to rehydrate as well. Some kids are heavier sweaters than others, or more salty sweaters. Sometimes you'll hear that too. And they could require more fluids, or other kids might not have those experiences, but still the hydration is vital. Another good practice to consider would be weighing the athlete before practice and then after. You can see how much weight they lose just by sweat. Depending on the amount of pads that they're wearing, the heat of the day, you can see how many pounds difference, and then supplement by having at least 16 to 24 ounces of fluid for every pound that's lost. It's a numerical way of checking the person's hydration status. And two-a-day practices, it's very important that we're going to get enough fluids so that we have the energy for the next practice. But also, when it comes to fluids, we often think of water first, and especially if our practice is an hour or less, water will suffice. If it's an hour or longer, then we could start to look at more of the electrolyte replacing fluids like a Gatorade or Powerade. So just knowing when to use that sports drink is a good topic to practice for the athlete, because sometimes that extra carb or sugar in that sports drink affects the athlete and their performance. So it might not be as helpful to be sipping on that all day or during the practice versus just using water and then the sports drink when you need it. So those are two main topics, the fuel that we're getting, the quality, quantity, and frequency, as well as the fluids. And if we start to teach and show and be a good example to our athletes of healthy nutrition now, even encouraging them to do it on their own. I mean, kids can help pick the types of foods they want, or healthy snacks to pack for their practices and shortly after a game. Making them involved, and also the fact that we're teaching them how to eat now. And in 10, 20 years, when they remember how they ate when they were athletes, if they were only eating Pop-Tarts and energy drinks to have that energy for a practice or game, we'd rather have healthy food options that they're going to consider in the future. So knowing that the nutrition we start now with our athletes on our team as coaches, or even our children if we're parents, it's going to make a big difference down the road. If I take any questions now, or I'll be in the back, I'd gladly answer anything specific. So with that, I guess